Woof woof and namaste. This is Hill Dog and welcome to Kanha Cast, a series of conversations with visitors and residents of Kanha Shantivanam, the International Center for Heartfulness. Today I'll be speaking to Brother Gyan Sarin. He is a management consultant and a long-time practitioner of heartfulness. He's also a heartfulness meditation trainer. For those of you who don't know, heartfulness is a meditation technique that is offered for free by volunteer trainers around the world. It was earlier known by the name Sehaj Marg, or the natural path. One of the specialities of heartfulness is meditation with the transmission of a very subtle energy. Since there will be a lot of reference to heartfulness in this talk, let me just fill you in on the heartfulness guides. The first guide was Lalaji, then there was Babuji. From 1983 to 2014, Chariji was the heartfulness guide, and from 2014 to the present day, Daaji has been the heartfulness guide. A heartfulness meditation session is often called a sitting, and a heartfulness meditation trainer is often called a preceptor. How long, Brother Gyan, have you spent in the heartfulness practice, doing the heartfulness practice?
I started when I was in school. I was introduced to the system by one of my teachers. And so that makes it, that was March 1980. That makes it exactly how many years? 42.
42 years. Wow.
Yeah.
So, how come you were interested in spiritual? Where do you think it started?
That's another story. Uh, see, this is another something, and again, very unusual about my childhood. Um, you don't generally remember anything below 3 years of age. So what I know of that phase, the first 3 years of my life, is from my mother, largely my mother and my parents, my other family people, elders. And they told me that while when I was 3 years old, that was my mother, that I would you know ask for certain specific things always. And it started by asking for some mithai before my meals. I would say, no, I want a mithai before. So she'll say, yes, you'll get a mithai. What's the problem? You eat your food first, then you'll get your mitha. But I would say, no, you put it before me, and then I will have my meal. I remember this little conversation because and my mother said, what's wrong with you? ये पंडितों की तरह आपके पहले मीठा. I said, I always start with the meetha. What do you mean I always start? I said, that's how I eat my food. She says, where are you been eating here? And then it seems I told her that I remembered it was as if I was living in that life. I wasn't here. It was a continuum from a past life. And then I started to tell her that, this is how I live. This is how I eat. This is what I do. And so that was a very startling thing for my family, that this fellow, and I refused to believe I mean, not believe, I mean, I was behaving as if I was not a child, 3-year old, but I was that person of that past life. And so my earliest recollections of my own this experience of remembering this past life was from, let's say, 5 to 6 years later. Prior to that, what I know, what I used to do is all from my mother. So I would actually dress differently, and I would ask for a janeu, that I need a janeu, I need a mandir here, I need these clothes.
And in your family, this wasn't.
Oh, it was, except for my grandmother. She
She was
was
devout.
she was devout, and she used to follow a very rigorous practice. But the others were just about, like, lip service kind, which they would come for some pujas, have the prasad, and that's it. That is what was for them. And non-vegetarian, staunchly fond of non-vegetarian, all of them. So except my mother and grandmother. So the ladies generally weren't, but all the men folk, my brothers, everybody. That was another difference. I refused to eat uh, any of that non-vegetarian
Right from
food
childhood.
right from childhood. And in fact, there was an incident which I recollect, and which was very, again, revealing. That one of my aunts, she said that, how can this fellow not have meat? I mean, how is he going to, like, survive without meat and things like that? So you just have to make an effort and make a meat, and then he'll get started. So she Very cleverly, my cousin, her daughter, she put the plates together. We used to eat, and she put her plate next to mine, and she started feeding both of us. And she took a chunk of meat with the roti from her plate and gave it to me. And instantly, I knew that it's not what it was. And I threw up,
Wow.
and I created a ruckus. I remember that.
How old were you then?
Probably 5.
Wow.
Yeah, because I remember this very clearly. And I created a ruckus. I said, "How dare you do this to me?" You know, irrespective of the fact that she was an elderly lady. And as a young child, I couldn't have even spoken to her like that. I was behaving like an old man and said, "How dare you do this to me? You have defiled my religion, and you have, how did you, आपने करा कैसे ये?" And
धर्म भ्रष्ट कहते हैं.
भ्रष्ट कर दिया. And I started talking. As she was also taken aback. My father had to intervene, and he said that, "Bhai, what is the problem?" I said, "If you do this kind of things to me, I will not live here. I will leave." And that's when he got very concerned. So then my mother, they sat me down. They started talking to me. They said, "Let's understand," and they then took a decision not to attempt anymore about this. But I was very sick. I kept throwing up. Didn't eat food, for the rest of the day. There's no point trying with this guy. Leave him alone. So then started this, revelation about the past life, that I was a Brahmin, not a Brahmin, but a non-Brahmin Pandit. Probably now, I mean, I can make that distinction now, but I used to at that point of time tell them that I was a Pandit in a temple in Mathura, and this was how I lived. This is how I live, not that I lived.
Mhm.
I am from there. I am so and so, and this is how I live. So if you can keep me like that, fine. Otherwise, I'll find my way. So my
Wow.
father said, "Don't worry, we'll give you what you want." So I gave a list of things, and he sent somebody to get those things, and everything was laid out. A small temple was set up for me in the house. I was given the janeu. I was given the dhoti, whatever, piece of cloth. And very funnily, I used to get up in the morning, early hours, and I said, "I will not have a bath in the bathroom. I have a bath and there was no, I mean, the what you call the kua was far off. So they said, "No, we can't allow you to go so early morning to the well. Why not a hand pump? Somebody will give you water from the hand pump, cold water in the morning." I used to have this bath with mantras, and then I started reciting mantras. So they said, "Where did you learn this?" I said, "This is what I do, you know." So this went on for about 2 years, I think. And then at the age of 7, I remember that a lot of people started coming and talking to me, and they wanted to know. "Ye kya?" And I was recounting the same story again and again, again and again. Eventually, my father said, "Let's put a stop to this, because this guy is going to, either get too much into it." And stopped people from meeting me about and talking to me about that. And he specifically about, there was this friend of his who was very keen to take me to Mathura. He said, "Let's take him there and let's check out and let's see what this whole thing is about." And but my father just put his foot down. He said, "No more. Let him live his natural life." And that's when I went to St. Joseph's in Nainital. When I shifted to the school, they started to reduce, because he made sure that nobody talked to me about it. And then I started to realize I'm in another life, that and that kind of weaning from that and movement into this started.
So up till then, you felt it was the same life
It was the
continuing.
same life continuing. I didn't realize I was another. I mean, I felt as if I was that person.
Wow. Wow.
And I could describe the temple. Like my mother sometimes used to sit me down out of curiosity when it was just two of us, and she would very lovingly ask me, "अच्छा बताओ मुझे क्या था वो temple में, क्या था ये था," and I would graphically describe. You know, so she was quite convinced that it was, and it was much later that I went on my own to check out whether this was how far what I remembered was there. And this is much later when I could travel on my own. I quietly went, didn't tell anybody. And I realized that a lot had changed. It wasn't like what I remembered. Those images that I have of places were quite different now. And I would estimate that the time lapse would be something like 200 to 250 years. I spoke to people there, tried to find out what was there, how this was earlier. So, for instance, that Tulsi one, my image of that one, that whole forest, there is nothing like a Tulsi one today. It's like all gone, and you have a little bit of that thing in, where that they say the Ras Leela happens.
Hmm.
There's a little patch left.
Yes, yes, where nobody's supposed to go
Nobody's
on
supposed
night,
to go and all.
moonlit nights.
Now that entire area for kilometers, several square kilometers was a Tulsi one, and you could only walk under the trees, and there were these passages, going under the trees, and there was this huge they were not very high trees, they're
Mhm.
low trees, but there were these passages, very interesting things you could go into them, and they were shaded. So people used to play, children used to play, people used to cross over from one point to the other there. Just about enough height to walk through. So those are all gone. There's nothing like that left now, except for that little patch. And even the temple changed. So, so for me, this whole phenomena of continuity of life is something from my own real
Experience,
experience.
first-hand experience.
Yes,
So you mentioned that 200 to 250 years is your estimation,
yes.
and you went to Mathura perhaps after school, after.
This was, I think, yeah,
So 250 years, you are meaning from death in that life to
yes.
birth in this life.
Yes, yes. So we
Wow.
have this concept of salvation, where I understood much later when I came into heartfulness that there is this difference between liberation and salvation. And that salvation is only a gap. It's a longer gap. I mean, some people would be born instantly. Some people are in a state of salvation, and perhaps now, if I, with my understanding of things now, uh, uh, I think you have to wait for that next phase when your evolution can go on, when circumstances are created for your evolution to go further from where you are. You have to wait for those right circumstances,
Mhm.
and perhaps it is our masters, this great uh, plan for me, that I was born and I came in touch with the system.
Yeah, because the heartfulness guide Daji also mentions very often that the soul is attracted to the
To the
vibration
Yes,
that is ready, and perhaps time is a very different concept
yes,
in
yes,
the physical world and in the world where there's no
yes,
physical existence.
yes.
So it's very interesting. And how? What about now? How much do you remember of your past life now?
I remember. See, memories are there, but it's not with that kind of intensity and that kind of detail. Also, interestingly, one of our preceptors, I mean, the Kasturi Benji again, my mother told her about this, and her first reaction was that don't intensify it, because the memories of one lifetime are not enough to deal with. You add one more, and
Wow.
so
Yeah.
there'll be unnecessary burden on the child. So that was one thing which I overheard, and I said yes, that I don't need to really. The second was a very interesting incident at Satkul about this. I had forgotten. Post my school, I became very deeply involved in heartfulness, and it was a very interesting journey because Babuji Maharaj was there, and I was lucky enough to meet him. Very very lucky, I should say. Just those 2 years, you
Mhm.
know, and I went completely. So much so that one day I realized that I hadn't even thought of going to a temple for the past. That was the very first year of my practice. That I used to pass by the same temples, and there was it as if I was passing by another building. There was no interest at all. And I remember recognizing this feeling in me, that how is it that I. And there was a time, that I used to, every Tuesday I used to go to the Hanuman temple in Nainital. And one Tuesday At around 9 o'clock in the night, I realized hadn't been. It was Tuesday and I had forgotten. I somehow must have mixed up the dates. 9 o'clock, it was beginning to drizzle. I got up and I said, I will go. Everyone there, everyone was tucked up in bed and they said, what crazy fellow, why, what's wrong with you? Even my grandmother said, "Ki, why don't you do something here? You don't need to." I said, no, I must go. Now that I remember, 9 o'clock in the night, I went, came back drenched, but I did go. And from that to this change where I'm passing by the same temple, I don't even realize I'm passing by that temple. So I remember noticing that change. So therefore, this was one, and therefore it completely wiped out this memory so much so that I think I almost forgot about it till many many years later in Satkul. Chariji was there, and I was suddenly called in, and he probably my elder brother spoke to him. It may have been in some context, and he told him that, oh, my brother also remembered his past life and things like that. So he immediately called me and he said, why didn't you tell me about it? I said, Sab, I actually, if you ask me, I forgot all about it. It didn't mean anything to me in the sense that uh, there was never a context where I could have said this to you. And so now that you were saying, I suddenly remembered. And I had this very strange feeling all through my childhood, from let's say till the age of 15 or so, till I joined Heartfulness. I had a very strange feeling which I could not understand, and it would manifest in very different ways. For instance, let's say I'm in a very joyful environment. There's a wedding going on, or there's people dancing around, and there's partying, and everybody is involved. I just couldn't connect with that environment, and the more of that happened, and the more detached I felt, and it used to worry me because sometimes I used to feel so out of place, and people used to feel that, why am I not uh, getting
Participating.
participating. So it used to, as a and as a young as a, let's say in my teens, that's something which used to worry me, and I used to, but I couldn't get over this feeling, and I didn't know what it was. And when I reflected back, even in my childhood, I remember that feeling in a greater or lesser intensity always being with me, and I couldn't recognize it. And Chariji called me and he said, why didn't you talk to me about this? I said, sir, didn't remember. It just so happened that and he said, did you feel melancholic in your childhood? I said, that is it. I used to have this feeling I couldn't recognize, and I think it was this. I used to feel melancholic. And he said, oh, okay, that was good. But he just completed that whole understanding of that, experience. And when he said that, and he never didn't explain why that was so. But I could then reflect back and remember why it must have been so. That I was very uh, disillusioned with religion. I was not, I used to have a Brahmin name, but I remember that I was from some kind of, this class which was a aristocracy, not necessarily Brahmin, but I lived a Brahmin's life. I took to a Brahmin's life and I went to this temple as a Brahmin because I felt that a Brahmin is by nature, not really by birth. And I think it was something like I was thrown out of the temple. I remember I could recollect that I couldn't recollect the exact incidents, but I remember that I was very, very disgusted and disillusioned with the life of these people there who were running the temple. And I took them on, and they saw to it that I was removed from there. And I remember that for the later part of that, my uh, age, this later part of my life, I lived somewhere in a hut, sort of a structure, very basic structure, and it was in a kind of a semi-forested area away from town. And I lived a very reclusive life. I had no children. I had a wife who was left behind, but no children. and it was a life of just uh, exasperation. That after having done so much, and after having, I actually didn't arrive at anything. I was left seeking. That seeking was not at all satisfied. And my last memory of that life is that I passed away reading some book, probably a Ramayana. And I just, I bent over and lay down on that book and passed out. And I also remember uh, my thoughts about the wife, that how would she now manage? I'm going,
Oh, so you recall the
yes,
thought of leaving the
leaving,
body.
leaving the body and leaving her behind. Stop for a
Yeah,
minute.
sure, sure.
So, and possibly that could have led to the melancholy.
So there was this pain of departure because of the memory of.
No, I think this disillusionment with what I had done all my life and not having got anywhere, disillusion with the system there, that the way they were. And in those days, I think there was a lot of corruption,
Even 300 years ago.
even 300 years ago. And that was a time, I suppose, when these were isolated places, because of the political thing in place, in the
Hmm.
sense you couldn't very openly do religious things. But probably the end of the Mughal era, a period of lot of confusion everywhere.
Yes, yes, yes.
So every one of these places acting independently, and so I think that whole, um I would say, not having achieved much, that seeking not being satisfied, having to leave this lady behind, it must have led to some kind of melancholia, which manifested in an, see, that you wouldn't know what, that's why you don't know the reason why it manifests, but you know the feelings for sure. And that's how I understood very clearly how this whole pattern of sanskars work, that there are no specific contexts, but the feelings are there, they manifest, and then they lead you into a certain direction. So um, after that, I think everything just became more of a uh, matter of research for me on my own experience.
Mhm.
It doesn't impact me in that sense the way it did earlier.
And you remember the time of mortality. I think a lot of us are very concerned in the sense that there's so much literature about death and so much, there's so much fear associated with death. Was there a fear also of at
No,
that moment?
no fear,
There was no fear.
no fear, and maybe that is what led to this whole period of, you know,
Hmm.
grace, where I was waiting for the next process to start. But I also remember the devotion that I had at that time. I felt very, very uh, devoted, and even today, the Ramayana, um, it brings tears. Very many things. I cannot, I cannot hear these things when it makes me very emotional. So that's something again, which is, I don't know why.
Hmm.
These are now characters I know for so long, and yet if I come, if I go through this whole process, where let's say I'm watching a TV serial on that, or I'm even reading the Ramayana, or somebody is reciting it, it evokes something, and that's a vestige of.
Wow. So, do you remember if, since you are mentioning the Ramayana, but Mathura is associated with Krishna, more with
Yes.
Krishna.
Yes.
But were you more of a Ram Bhakt at that time? Do
No,
you
I
recall?
was just a seeker.
Just a seeker. It wasn't.
So it was just that I found, uh, I was trying to understand these personalities. So Krishna, of course, because I was in the Dwarkadhish temple, but that whole environment uh, sort of pushed me into a broader research. And I mean, in Hinduism, we know that there's this concept of avatars. So uh, you don't differentiate. If you really can get to the essence, you know that it's the same essence manifesting. And that I remember. That is why I was probably after that phase of being with the Krishna tradition, I was maybe studying this other thing.
Wow, that's very interesting. And are the memories associated even now? Are they personal, or do you remember things about the polity and the economy of that time? I mean, mundane stuff, or just the
They are
distant,
more personal
more personal.
because I think I wasn't really concerned much about the rest of the world. I was very focused on
Hmm.
this seeking, and those are nuances of that. Those experiences I remember more than the rest of it.
What life was like, and that sort of thing is not.
Very little,
Hmm.
very little from my own thing. But I was definitely living for the good later part of my life. I was living completely as a recluse
In isolation.
in isolation.
But again, when you are in this life with all these memories, one would think it would be extremely difficult to adjust to modern life in the sense that now you have these memories of a lifetime of spiritual search, and where at the end you feel you have not reached anything. So the temptation would be there to resume the search again rather than get involved in the mundane affairs of life. Was that a problem? Was that a problem adjusting?
For a while. But I would say, very, very fortunate that the system found me. I don't think I had the wherewithal. If I had searched, the only thing I remember doing was, as advised by um, Yoganandji in that book, he said that each one in nature, I mean, nature designates a guru for each one, and according to your seeking. And if you pray, the guru will come to you. So I said, let me, just as an experiment. I remember that all I was doing it before going to sleep. I would say, okay, let him come to me. And he actually did, you know. So apart from that little prayer, I don't think I had the wherewithal to have reached this system. It found me, and probably um, uh, had that not happened, that adjustment would have been far more difficult. As I said, one adjustment took place at the age of 7, 8, 9, when I moved out of that continuum into a new life, and I recognized that I was in this life now. So that was one switch over which happened, and with some difficulty, but it happened. The second happened very smoothly because in heartfulness we know this entire thing that life is a continuum. So it just, that understanding clicked into place the moment I read Babuji's those 5 books, which is all that we had. Most of it was that only at that time when I joined. Those were the core books, which still are, but there wasn't all this much of literature that we have now today. So the very first time that I read them, everything fell into place, and I realized that this whole concept of balancing the material and the spiritual side was very attractive to me, in the sense that I was. Uh, I think I definitely had this inclination that I'm not going to go into the material side, that I'm going to continue with my seeking. And I could have, in fact, my father was very apprehensive that I'll one day leave and maybe
Take up sannyas or
take up.
something,
Yeah.
become a sadhu.
So, yes. So that's why he would discourage anyone talking to me about past life or any of these things. He will cut short all those conversations, say, enough now, don't take him back into this. So he told me later that he used to be very concerned that I might just go away one day. So that switchover was more than what I could have asked for. That whole understanding of how we need, and possibly that is what had not happened in the previous
Mhm.
experience, the previous phase of seeking, which I could then uh, understand. And and of course, Chariji, with whom I had more of my mentoring, that phase was more with him as a he truly brought about this understanding that excellence in both sides is equally important. And he would always see to it that he would always concern, what are you doing, how are your studies going, what exams you intend to. So all of these things he would discuss. And in fact, through the first phase of my employment also, I used to keep telling him, there was this one thing which I took up, which I was not really agreeing with me. And he said that, look, a job is a job. The primary purpose is livelihood. Do this until you find the next one. You can't just go by, this doesn't suit me. You need to be employed. You need to get going with life. And this is something you need as a basis for the other life, as a support system for the other life. So that concept, that understanding luckily came at the right time. I didn't struggle and waste time. So, at that, let's say at the age of 20 to 24, he very clearly, and he monitored. Whenever we would meet, he would ask, what are you doing now, and what is this, and how are you faring with your job? How are you? So even with marriage, for that matter,
Mm.
he saw to it that we don't get into that imbalance. I had this conviction once I read the five books. Whatever, I think I understood very little of it at that time. I don't think I understood the way I understand now. And we all keep growing in that understanding, ever growing understanding. But let's say when I entered college, uh, and I was well into, let's to about 2 years of being in the system. I'd read these books. I was very convinced that uh, this is uh, the best that I know. So far, this is the best that I've discovered. But as our system, it does not stop you from exploring. That's a beautiful aspect of the system. That it never says that this is the end and you should never look beyond. And looking at Chariji Saab himself, he was intellectually a giant. He had read so much. Whenever you sat with him, he would talk about what he had read, and that sort of opened up the horizon for me. That you can explore. So I used to read. I got reading. I read a lot of psychology of whatever he used to talk about. I used to go back and read. If he spoke of Jung, I would go back and find that book. He spoke of Freud, I'll pick up that and try and read. And for that matter, Eric Burns, games people play, he mentioned that. I said, let me read that. And so that's how my progression of you know uh, that intellectual expansion happened alongside. So I would read them with the view that how does it vis-a-vis our own system. I would used to try and place it somewhere, to make
Mm.
an assessment that, okay, is it? And I would always invariably come to the conclusion that it's nowhere near our philosophy, or our depth of the thought process that is there in our system. And but I used to just compare, and I used to read it more for curiosity than for seeking. The
Mm.
seeking stopped, and it was a more very joyful exploration then. So I explored many things at that time, but not with a seeking, but just to understand what they are and how does it sort of relate with our system.
There was no uncertainty in that at all.
No uncertainty. It was a very joyful exploration of what else exists, not looking for something, but
Sure.
just exploring. And as a youngster, also inspired by Chariji's own example of that he knew so much about everything else
Mhm.
other than just the system. So each time you would talk to him or heard his talks, there was an inspiration to look at something, and uh, and that also stopped after some time. When you got into a job, there were different concerns. So it was for, let's say, those 4 or 5 years of college, and where I really, and that understanding stays with me. I think it was very helpful because you are able to understand your own system and what you are doing and your own experiences in a much better perspective. If you know, I mean, if you keep this in isolation, you would never be able to appreciate it so much.
So true. So true. Now, you met Babuji when you were in school, the first meeting with Babuji, and this was at Kitcha at Chaudhry Harpal Singh's farm.
Yes, it was a very, very profound uh, experience. Yeah, we were about 10 or 12 of us in all,
In all,
in all,
Kitcha at the farm
at that
and
time,
Babuji.
that evening when he arrived.
Wow.
But uncle had given us instructions. I think he had given instructions to people that when he arrives, this is how you must line up. This is how you must receive Babuji. No one is going to touch his feet or interrupt him. Come forward. Just stand on the sides, let him pass through, and you can wish him. And that's exactly what we did. We saw the car coming in from, from, you can see from far,
Yes, yes,
and
yes.
where the garages are today, just in front of that garage, there's that space. So we all lined up, five this side and five this side, and Babuji Maharaj.
The
And I
reception
could,
committee.
yes, reception committee. And I could see him. I still remember that sight, when the car turned and I could see the front of the car and I could see Babuji sitting in the front seat along with uncle. And he came down, and then we all wished him. He wished us, with folded hands, just walked past us, and he went into that room. Is still there, but it was a room made of asbestos. At that time, that house wasn't there.
Mhm.
It was just a couple of, you know, uh,
Sheds, like,
sheds
yes, yes.
actually. And in one of the sheds, he was to stay. And he went in and freshened up and all. And his chair was put outside in the lawn, and his hookah was uh, placed there soon after. And then and we sat around that chair, and I sat right in the corner, you know to the chair, that if Babuji would come, he wouldn't actually, I wouldn't see him face to face. It will be on, I was on the side, on the, I think, right hand side, immediate side, sitting there. And of course he came out in his, in his, that short sleeved, he used to wear. And he came and sat down, relaxed, started smoking the hookah. Nothing was said, and I was looking at him intently like this, on from the sides, because his side face was, uh, I could see, and I'm just looking at him like that, and just, and he suddenly turned and he looked into my eyes, maybe 5 seconds, and it was something very intense. It was as if he had seen me through and through. You know, shook me up, and there was a vibration right across. It was, and um, again I didn't know what was happening, you know, but it was something, and he just turned, looked like this, and he looked back, and but I remember something, a feeling coming into me at that time. After a while, when we got up from there, and I had heard people say that Babuji can, just by his look, he can do what he has to do, and I felt that that was it. Whatever he had to do for me, he did in that look. And even today, I feel that whatever is manifesting, you know, it's a it's a is a consequence of that. It's a resultant of that. You know, it's just manifesting, and what he had to do at that time. There's nothing close to that. I couldn't have imagined anything like that. I've never experienced that kind of thing again. That except the feeling. Every time. Then of course, our successive masters. I think it put me into a totally different uh, dimension. It was like that, that there was, as I said, even from the first few sittings, there was no seeking. There was no more seeking. I only wanted to seek what more is there in the system rather than
Explore
look
outside.
at it whether this is good for me or not, or whether, whether I, like, for instance, I was doing Gayatri, I was doing these other systems. There was something which was still lacking. I was felt that I'm not fully. Uh, there's still something I want to know and experience more. But that went, and with this was a totally different. I think uh, I didn't even realize probably the complete impact of that, but I knew something very major has happened. Something very very profound has happened, and just by going by the sheer physical manifestation of that experience, that itself was something very profound, leave alone the spiritual uh, aspect of it. So I knew that has happened, and thereon, after that, I think a great enthusiasm came, and I was not just practicing myself, I was talking about it to everybody.
Great, great. But thank you so much. Thank you so much
Thank you. It was
for taking out time and
it was a great journey back
down memory
down
lane.
memory lane.
So this will definitely have to have a part 2, or maybe even a part 3. Who knows?
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So that was my conversation with Brother Gyan Sarin. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. To hear more such conversations, please subscribe to this channel, and also you can find us on Spotify on the Kanacast channel. That is Kanhacast. Thank you for listening. This is Hill Dog signing off. Woof woof.